What if I told you the biggest rock anthem of the 80s was hated by the band's own guitar player? He quit at the absolute peak of their fame because he couldn't stand the sound that made them superstars, only to realize a solo record that sounded exactly like the song he despised. They were told to cut their hair and sing in Swedish, but instead they conquered the world, and then went on a decade-long hiatus because their singer was just tired of the whole thing. Here's how a keyboard riff written by a teenager in his bedroom accidentally created a global phenomenon that would define and almost destroy a band.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
So there's these two kids from a suburb of Stockholm, Sweden, Joey Tempest and John Norum. It's 1979, they're just 15 years old, completely obsessed with bands like Deep Purple and Thin Lizzy. So they start a band with a couple other guys, Peter Olsson on bass, Tony Reno on drums, and they call themselves Force. They spend their days honing their craft, writing songs, trying to get noticed, but every record company they go to tells them the same thing. Your hair is too long, you gotta cut it. Your songs are in English, you gotta sing in Swedish. This is a hard rock band in the land of ABBA, and nobody is buying it. And the band basically tells them all to get lost. They weren't going to change for anybody. They had a vision for what they wanted to be, and singing in Swedish was not a part of it. The lineup shuffles a bit. The original bass player Peter leaves, and John Levin comes in. And for a weird 3-month period, John actually leaves to play with Yngwie Malmsteen, and another guy fills in, but Levin comes right back. The kind of instability you would expect from a bunch of teenagers trying to make it. Then comes 1982, and the band's still grinding, still going nowhere fast. That's when Joey Tempest's girlfriend at the time decides to take matters into her own hands. Without telling them, she enters Force into this massive national music competition, the Swedish Rock Championships. It's a huge deal. 4,000 bands from all over the country competing. And somehow this band that no record label would touch ends up winning the entire thing. They just blew everybody away with their songs, In the Future to Come and The King Will Return. Joey wins the award for Best Lead Singer, and John Norum wins for Best Guitar Player. They're the undisputed champion. But right before the contest, Joey had an idea. He thought the name Force was a little generic. Inspired by a Deep Purple live album called Made in Europe, he suggested they change their name. So Force became Europe. And the prize for winning the championship was a record deal with Hot Records. The guy who ran the label, Thomas Erdmann, who also organized the contest. Well, he ended up groaning when he come to find out that he had to work with a hard rock band. He was not a fan, but a deal was a deal. So they finally get to make their first album. Self-recorded title, Year Up, is recorded in just 2 weekends, raw and fast. Joey is even playing the keyboards himself. It's their heaviest record, full of the influences they grew up on, and it actually does pretty well. It's number 8 on the charts in Sweden, and a single from it, Seven Doors Hotel, becomes a top 10 hit all the way over in Japan. So they go back into the studio for their second album, Wings of Tomorrow, which comes out in '84. And this is the album that gets them noticed internationally. And they land a big contract with CBS Records. For the live shows, they bring in a dedicated keyboard player, Mick McKelly, and pretty soon he's a full-time member of the band. But there's more drama with the lineup. Their drummer, Tony Reno, gets fired. The original reason? Lack of motivation. That he was slacking off and not showing up for rehearsals. Years later, the old bass player Peter Olsson would claim that Tony didn't even play on the albums and was replaced by a drum machine. And in his place comes Ian Hoogland, and with that, the classic lineup of Europe was set. This was the group that was about to accidentally take over the entire world. The story of their biggest hit starts years earlier, around 1981. Joey Tempest is messing around on a chord keyboard that he had borrowed, comes up with this epic fanfare-like synth riff. Just a little idea, something he records on a cassette and puts away in a drawer. And it sits there for years. Fast forward to 1985, the band is getting ready to record their third album. John Levin, the bass player, hears the old keyboard demo and tells Joey he should write a song around that riff. Joey, inspired by David Bowie's Space Oddity, starts writing lyrics about leaving Earth, a grand farewell to the planet. Thing is, nobody in that band, not even Joey, thought this was going to be a hit single. They just saw it as a cool, bombastic song to open their concerts with. It was over 6 minutes long. It had this massive synth intro. It was not pop music. So when they get in the studio with producer Kevin Elson, the disagreements start. John Norum, the guitar player and co-founder, absolutely hated it. He thought it was ridiculous. Couldn't stand the synth intro and felt the song was way too different from their hard rock roots. Mick McKelly, the keyboardist, who had now had to play the part, wasn't a huge fan either. He and Norum both thought Rock the Night, another track from the album, should be the big single. But Joey believed in the song, and crucially, the producer, Kevin Elson, sided with him. Ellison saw the potential. The band eventually and somewhat reluctantly agreed to release The Final Countdown as the first single. 4D chess move, even though they didn't know of it at the time. The album of the same name came out in May of 1986, and what happened next was something nobody could have predicted. The song was a freaking monster. Global nuclear explosion of a hit. Went to number 1 in 25 different countries. Single sold 8 million copies. The album went triple platinum in the US, hit the top 10 on the Billboard charts. They followed it up with Rock the Night and the massive power ballad Carrie, which hit number 3 in America. And suddenly Europe was one of the biggest bands on the planet. But while the world was singing along, things inside of the band were falling apart. John Norum was miserable. He was watching the band he co-founded turn into something that he didn't recognize and couldn't respect. He hated the image they were pushed into, what he called the spandex poodle rock type of thing. He saw them becoming a teeny bopper bubblegum band, and it just repulsed him. The sound was the biggest problem. The keyboards were up front and center, dominating everything, and his heavy guitar work, the very foundation of the band, was getting pushed to the back. It felt like his songs weren't wanted, and that Joey and their manager, Thomas Erdman, were acting like bosses, making all the decisions without him. On top of the artistic frustration, by his own admission, he was partying way too hard. So in October 1986, right in the middle of a massive tour, and at the absolute zenith of their fame, John Norum quit. He just walked away from the biggest band in the world. And the irony of it all came from a year later when he released his solo album, Total Control. The lead single, Love Is Meant to Last Forever, sounded so much like The Final Countdown that fans joked it was part 2. It was clear that even though he hated the direction, the sound was now part of his DNA. He left because he hated the synth-heavy pop rock and then went and made synth-heavy pop rock. The band had to scramble to replace him. They brought in Key Marcello, a great guitarist who was suddenly thrust into the whirlwind of Europe's global fame. He joined just as they were about to become even bigger stars. They went on tour with Def Leppard, whose singer Joe Elliott would later say that Europe was the wildest band they ever toured with. This flew in the face of the clean-cut, wholesome pretty boy image that they had. Joey Tempest later admitted how much he hated that facade. He said, "We're no angels," and he wished he had pushed back against the clean-living image that came with their mega hit. They tried to follow up the success with the 1988 album Out of This World. Joey said he even tried to write a sequel to The Final Countdown, but realized it would just be a parody. The album did well, selling 1 million copies in the US, and the single Superstitious was a hit, but it was clear the magic wasn't quite the same. It would be the last time Europe ever charted in the United States. Their next album, Prisoners in Paradise, released in 1991, was made under a dark cloud. The music world had changed. The slick, polished rock of the 80s was being killed off by the raw, garage-like sound of grunge. Bands like Nirvana, and of course, Guns N' Roses, who were not grunge, were what people expected to hear. So they were kind of outweighed even by both sides of the coin. Europe had a tough time recording the album. The producer, the legendary Bob Rock, left the project to go work with Metallica on what would become the Black Album. The record label, Epic, was breathing down their necks, pressuring them for more hits. They wanted another Carrie. Some of the band members felt the album ended up sounding too American, way too manufactured. Despite selling 1 million copies, it got almost no media attention. The party was over. In 1992, after a show at the Tokyo Dome where they shared a bill with Metallica, they saw the writing on the wall. After 10 years of non-stop work, the band decided to take a break. Joey Tempest said he wanted to do a solo career and try something completely different. Bassist John Levent later offered a different story. He claimed Joey was the only one who really wanted to stop, and that tax problems and a constant barrage of bad press were the real reasons for the hiatus. Whatever the truth, Europe was dropped by Epic Records and went silent. The hiatus lasted for over a decade. Joey Tempest released solo albums that explored different genres, even country. John Norum continued his solo career and did a stint with the band Dokken, but as he put it, his solo work failed to set the world on fire. The other guys played in various side projects. It seemed like the story was over. But then, on New Year's Eve 1999, they got back together for a one-off show in Stockholm. In a unique twist, both John Norum and Key Marcello played lead guitar, sharing the stage to blast through Rock the Night and, of course, The Final Countdown. Spark was still there. It took another few years, but on October 2nd, 2003, it was made official. Europe was reuniting for a new album and world tour. But there was a catch. The lineup would be the classic Final Countdown lineup, which meant John Norum was back, and Norum had one condition for his return. He had to be the only lead guitar player. He was not interested in sharing the spotlight. That meant Key Marcello was out. Key later said he would have been open to a 6-piece tour, but the offer never came. He had other projects and was heading in a different musical direction anyway, but it was a clear sign that Norum was back in the driver's seat. When they released their comeback album in 2004, Start from the Dark, they made a very clear statement. This was not going to be an 80s nostalgia act. They were with the same producer, Kevin Elson, but they wanted a heavier, more modern sound. Norum's guitars were detuned, the production was more raw, in your face, and it was a world away from their polished heyday. Some critics and old fans were not impressed, finding the songs weak, but the band didn't care. They were finally making the music they wanted to make. And over the next decade, they released a string of albums: Secret Society, Last Look at Eden, Bag of Bones, War of Kings, each one exploring a modern classic rock sound, leaning heavily into their 70s roots and blues influences. Drummer Ian Haugland admits that some of the older fans miss the more melodic style of the old days, but the band just wants to move forward. And as for Final Countdown, the song that started it all, they made their peace with it. Joey Tempest has said he's probably never done an interview where the song wasn't mentioned, and he wonders how their career might have been different without it. And chances are, it might not have been without it. But Ian calls it the principal reason the band is still around today, acknowledging the hit's gigantic impact. And John Norum, the man who quit the band because he hated the song, now says he loves playing it live. Why? Because now they play it his way. It's heavier, tougher, more on their terms. It's the sound of a band that went to the top of the world, fell apart, and found a way to come back together, not as pop stars, but as the rock band they always wanted to be.